panel, a Q&A with Transformers toy designer Aaron Archer. And you know Mako is from Transformers Slide. We've got Protoman, aka Daniel.
How you doing, everyone? So we're going to give you guys a special one today. These were pulled from the old archives of Hasbro. A lot of this stuff has never been seen before. Is yours on? Come on, Aaron. Is he on?
My basement thought.
You can do it.
Hello. He's got it. Come
on. Burying the lead. As he's doing that, so these were a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that we're going to be talking about again this year. Age of the Primes is the new flavor. The original 13. Test your mic. Is it good? No, you're not holding it? Okay. And so we're going to be showing pretty much how all these guys were created. And we're going to have a whole, even me, who I like to pride myself on knowing everything, when we went through this, there was stuff I've never seen before, really wild stuff about early ideas, and you'll see it all in a moment. I just wanted to just put this up here, just showing a little bit of the evolution of this concept. Again, it was an old Simon Furman idea. Many years ago, Simon was just like, hey, there was these ancient primes, and there was this old idea of the Zodiac or something. And, the Zodiac, the 12, but maybe the 13th, and, all of that. Does it work? Yep. Yeah, there we go. So here's the man himself, Aaron. He's going to flesh it out. These come from your old basement files and stuff from the Hasbro days.
I'm going to try to explain to you how we developed these things as a story concept and why they needed to be further developed. And it's amazing to me now, 20 years after the fact. Now we're getting the toys. So pretty cool. So a lot of what you're going to see is very early,
super early
chicken scratch,
yeah,
which is really rough notes as I would then go work with more professional creators to do better art. But
so we're going to go one at a time through each of the 13 early development, early ideas. It's a very fascinating ride you're going to have today.
So one of the things I got into is something we call the aligned continuity, and it was trying to take any loose ends of the Transformer mythos and at least have an explanation within Hasbro of what that meant. Didn't necessarily mean it was going to get outboard. In this case, with the Covenant book, it did. But that's what we're going to go through. I was trying to solve for loose ends in the franchise. And the 13 was certainly one of them, because I think there were maybe 3 that were identified at the time.
You will get into that, yeah. So, early ideas.
Yeah, so this is the BS way I had to talk to management about the history of Transformers before the Transformers. The Primus versus Unicron astroplane battles that get locked in a metal thing that separate, after a fight, and then Primus creates the 13 out of his metal bits to fight Unicron. So this is a shorthand of how I used to communicate with management with that kind of stuff.
And here we go.
So this is actually out of one of my sketchbooks. For the first time, trying to think of all the different themes that the 13 should be. And I hit upon the idea of all these segments of within Transformers, whether it be Beast, combining, Minicons, stuff like that. And let's go back to the original 13 as the progenitor of those concepts. So they all represent things within Transformers lore. Who built these weapons, the ultimate villain type, the ultimate hero type, that kind of stuff. Vector Prime's in there. I put Quintus in there because the Quintessons never made sense to the toy world of Hasbro, right? There's a story that they create the Transformers or whatever. In this idea, he's one of the 13. He's more like a Johnny Appleseed character that would go and birth all these other planets that became Speedia and Gigantoa and all that kind of stuff.
Why there's other colonies.
Yeah, why there are other transforming entities out there. Minicons became their own 13. Alpha Trion, Leech Maximo were already kind of in the pantheon. So I'll go through it. All right, so this is the origins of Solus Prime, believe it or not. Trying to understand, this is real rough concept stuff, people. This isn't trying to be the prettiest pictures. This thinking out loud on paper. You know, how maybe this character manipulates sparks to create the things like the Matrix and the Requiem Blaster stuff and Star Saber swords and all these elements of the lore. This person was, we didn't even know what she was called at the time, but responsible for all that stuff. One person was the weapons maker, so to speak. No idea what that's.
It was so long ago.
Yeah. And you can tell if they're out of my sketchbooks because you can see the scans.
Yeah, the little ring
spider
binder.
bound, yeah. So I still have the sketchbook, I have a version I can inherit that.
So we'll start with the first one.
So taking the silhouettes from this other page here. So the first one clearly is the Prime Warrior, or Prima, or the ultimate heroic version of the character, which really you don't ever get to, right? Because ultimately Optimus becomes this, but this is kind of the ideal, right? And then
Ken's art.
and then these guys were supposed to be huge. So if they're all Fort Max or bigger scale characters, you can see the matrix of leadership is actually in the hilt of the sword. So that's how big this character scale-wise is meant to be.
And then some other interpretations throughout the years from different artists. And like at the time, we didn't know, like, okay, is Prima what Greg drew all those years ago in 1989? Because it was the first. And then of course Carlos, when he did the Movieverse books with IDW. Anyone who knows that protoform Optimus, that also could be your Prima figure in certain continuities. Livio, when he did the IDW stuff, of course we all know Transformers 1, and AB's designs, and then of course Age of the Primes. I want to assume it was Marcelo. I never confirmed who did that big poster.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, because Marcelo did the boxes, but I don't know who did the spread art, so I can't confirm that one, but that's, you know.
And what you'll notice in all these, it wasn't like we were trying to retcon everything exactly. What do we got to do to go forward? You know, it wasn't like, you know, we were trying to sort this guy out, but in hindsight, things were being built on as we went forward. Hasbro never wanted someone that had to go do a research project 30 years behind the fact to figure out what's happening today, so we just constantly moving forward.
And then of course what they ended up with,
That's what
which is the current product, which kind of is an amalgam of a bunch of different ideas using an appearance in the cartoon with a head sculpt, a different kind of chest that pulls from something else, much more similar to what Ken did all those years ago with the Covenant of Primus.
I can be straight with all of you. I didn't think any of these guys would ever get made. That wasn't the point as toys, because I knew they were kind of story wackadoo. You know, they're kind of often
The gods.
Yeah, often talked about, like, before Zeus, there were those other things. You know, and we never talked about those. So it's
You
like
talk
that.
about Hercules.
Yeah.
So Alpha Triumph.
Alphatron. So obviously he had been in his storytelling, some sort of historian or bookkeeper or lore keeper. He had the quill. So we kind of pulled him into the 13 since he was already an old character.
A pre-existing guy that, again, playing with those ideas of something that existed before. We kind of assumed he was old. That's all we knew. He's the old guy. How old is he? What's his story? He has a beard. Transformers have beards. Usually are old, unless you're Scourge, you know? But, so, you know, facial hair was a thing. So it's, you know, how do you tell that story? How do you fold that into it, you know? And
Sorry, I got to turn around. This was just me trying to put some of them together. Liege, Maximo at the time, Alpha Trion,
Micronus back there.
Micronus in here. We'll get to him.
Some of that early art again.
And so this one, so when we were doing the 13, obviously we're in the soup of Transformers lore. Takara is a big part of that as well. So when Ken was creating the art, we worked with Takara to also create art so that they were a part of this. So they did the art for the Minicon, Micronus, and Alpha Trion because they had heart for those characters, so that they were also part of the development of the 13. So we were working together even on these weird concepts. So this guy was done in Ken style, but in Japan.
By Hirofumi. It's the only of the original 13 that isn't done by Ken. Is Hirofumi? Oh, was Hirofumi Micros? Okay. I just swore it was only, oh, okay. So maybe I miscredited that. So now this one, there's too many Alpha Trions, so we're just going to stick with some of the greatest hits. Of course, the Fleero Deary design through Sunbow, that's the most famous that people know. Of course, you know, Derek, although that's Marcello's, but Derek, his art. Francesco through Cyberverse, again AB with Transformers 1, and whoever it was, one day we'll find out, for Age of the Primes. That might be a look into what that toy will look like. So if you're curious what your Alpha Trion might look like for Age of the Primes, look very carefully at that.
Yeah, so this guy we didn't really monkey with a lot. He was who he was. He'd been in G1. It was like we don't need to overly recreate the wheel, maybe modernize him a little bit. So he was kind of easy.
Yeah.
So that one, that's why it's quick on Alpha Trion, because
My boy Vector Prime.
Yeah.
So this is the original beginnings of what are we doing with these 13? And maybe this guy, for his story purpose, needed to be the time and space traveler. That's a pretty epic power. Most Transformers don't have that kind of power. Let's make him one of the 13. And so that's how he became that. And I did a lot of him. Early on, he was really wackadoo.
yeah, it's the really early art.
And then eventually became more of the Egyptian vibe. He was supposed to look like the Autobot logo at one point, like he was the original, I don't want to say the original Autobot, but
Kind of like the inspiration for
the core guy.
within the lore.
We went away from that because I didn't want to commit to that forever. You know, his head was the logo, because that creates extra storytelling that I didn't want to deal with. And then we started to hone him in this ancient Swiss watch Egyptian type character. Again, trying to connote old, knowledgeable, powerful.
And then we get a little closer to what, more or less, we're almost there.
And these are all Hasbro side ideas, concepts, that then
on Ken's.
took that. So now my headcanon and what I'm trying to push is they all were gold, or look, in their glorious times they looked gold, or at least Vector Prime did. And by the time we see him in Cybertron, all his chrome has fallen off, just like the toys over time. So he's white and brown because his chrome has fallen off. But this is what he looked like in the glory days of the 13.
With the time sword, yeah, everyone's ancient weapon. I guess go back one. You can do it. There you go. So again, there's the Aaron Archer Xibaneller, Takashi Kuniharu-san, kind of a fusion of 3 different great minds to make that. Jose, his little pop that he appeared in Prime. Walter did Robots in Disguise 2015, he made a little appearance there. And of course, AB, Transformers 1, and Age of the Primes. We got Vector right there, but spoiler, we know what that toy looks like, so that should be the next time.
His big red chest, circle chest, his big shoulders, and his triangle head kind of remain consistent, so that's pretty good. You can tell it's Vector Prime from the other ones most of the time. And then he lives on.
Yep. So you got that, all those elements.
So now I encourage Hasbro to make this guy chrome. Let's make that happen.
Let's talk about the Forger, the Builder, Solus Prime.
Yeah, so in my sketches, I didn't name these characters. I was just trying to figure out
Concepts.
the theme of the character, right? So the Forger and the Builder, she has the handle and the hammer.
Yeah, that's Ken's art there. Wish it would be bigger, but
Yeah.
so.
And the thing we did at the time, like, you know, this is what we did at the time. I don't know if it was the right thing, but the percentage of the 13 being women, female type, permeates across time and space then. So if only 2 or 3 of them out of 13 are feminine, then over time, that's why you don't have that many feminine bots down the line. That was our logic to explain it to ourselves. Don't know if that's the best story, but that's what we were.
It's you have to think about it. How many
We
are
didn't make women toys.
Yeah, how many RCs were there at the time, especially when you were writing it back then, especially when back then you were talking 2006. There was probably Thunderblast, a couple of RC figures, to the 4,000 mail override, Nitro Convoy, to the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mail toys. So that percentage, 1/13.
Again, I don't know if it was a good idea, but
It was just
full disclosure, that's what our thought process was.
early ideas that never panned out in the end. Again, same thing, Jose, Sarah Stone, her stuff that she did with the Windblade books, Christopher for the Prime Wars trilogy, just different ideas, ways that she's interpreted and how she evolved throughout the years. And there's, again, because she was a newer entity, much more of a consistency of, having the forge, that kind of design, the shoulder pads.
We're doing the Align continuity at the same time they're developing Prime. So that's why they were exposed to the concept of the 13, and that's why it kind of made its way in those kind of pan and scan scenes of those images.
Yeah, those ancient storytelling
That
moments.
was their effort to help us push the story out a little bit more.
And then, of course, finally got to that. So I don't know, maybe it's just my opinion. I'm not a fan of some of the alt modes. When I think ancient Cybertron, I don't think those kind of vehicles. I would want something more fantastical, but I guess that's just a design choice for folding and stuff. But I mean, robot mode is hot though, so.
If you make the vehicles too unidentifiable, you
Yeah.
run into problems. So they kind of went with sci-fi truck.
It's got a radiator grill. And I'm a car mechanic, so it's like, okay, so that means, I don't know, it just.
Could be an internal fork.
I guess so. I don't know. I always imagine just something a little more alien, Cybertronian. No wheels. I mean, again, look at all our Origin G1 stuff we have with Bumblebee and Jazz and Wheeljack, where it's no wheels, it's hovercrafts and stuff. So
The head and hammer are really good though.
yeah. Oh, the robot mode is fantastic. If you just focus on that, it does what it needs to do, and that's how we're going to display it anyways, right? So it doesn't matter. Yeah.
It's all about that hammer.
Yeah. So it's like Quintus.
Let's Quintus Traveler dude. So I like creepy guys. Quintessons are weird. They got tentacles and stuff and multiple faces. So I came up with the idea that it's a different form of Transformer, and he has a bag of sparks that he would cast out as he traveled the cosmos as seeding plants.
Like Johnny Appleseed.
And that's, again, how you would ultimately end up with all these different Transformer life forms on all these different planets over time. It gives us the reason to be like, oh, there's hundreds, we just haven't seen them yet, right? A lot of story potential there.
Yeah, it opens it up completely. Another better drawing.
I did some refining drawings to get them to Ken. My art was only to communicate an idea of what we needed to get done. Somebody else is also going to come in always and make it a more fleshed idea. Another version of my creepy face.
Just playing with the idea, refining it. Again, you see the bag, if you look carefully, with the sparks in it, which that might be his ancient weapon,
Yeah. So then Ken took that idea and added, they kind of also became responsible for the space bridges in a way.
because that's how they get around.
Yeah, so that's why that's there. So I like that interpretation. It's pretty funky. I never liked the idea that the Quintessons made the Transformers, right? More on they tried to fake them out at some point, but it really goes back to the sky. They could get confused.
It takes away from their importance.
Yeah,
Because it's like, oh, they were just manufactured stuff, and then they were built. That's kind of boring, So
That's a comic story, or?
no, that's the G1 cartoon, and which has been retconned since. Thank you, Sakamoto-san. So, and again, Livio, his version, the recent Germain did Earthspark, so that's his interpretation. Which I'll tell you this right now, the legs go off the screen, that is a very tall Quintesson, that one. And again, AB with Transformers 1. And again, here's a little look at what you might be getting as a toy. soon, so kind of hard to see, but there you go. So, and that's more or less that. My Cronus,
A lot of chrome on it. So I created the mini cons with Takara. We thought of them as little powerful batteries. So the idea that one of them would be a 13, we thought he'd be the ultimate power in the universe, tucked in this small, contained little form, right? Pure, literally pure energy, energon. So I had this idea of putting him in the bubble as a kind of a mystic control mechanism. You know, anything outside the bubble he can't control. He's so powerful it would blow up. So he kind of zens out inside the energon bubble.
and it plays with the idea like a mini con when it attaches to a transformer, all of that energy is channeled into them, concentrated, and thus it unlocks something.
And so I had sent this to Takara, and that's how they then. So this isn't Ken. This is
So that wasn't Ken, okay.
It's got Takara. But they took my concept fairly faithfully and just did the things to it, which is great. And you can see the M on the chest. And
Mini con,
yeah, so maintaining the mini-con logo idea a little bit.
So that one was Hirofumi, okay. So then again, Jose for Prime, Walter had an interpretation that, because he was a little bit of a character in Transformers, Robots in Disguise. Chris did his version in IDW, and again, different interpretations. AB for Transformers 1, and if you look at the Age of the Primes one, and you look at what Walter did, you can see where you get an idea of what he probably will look like for the future.
And we were doing this all for the story potential downstream. We didn't know where this stuff would go, but you can tell that they have used a lot of these characters down the line in a lot of different formats, and that's why we were trying to codify and create. So it is satisfying that so much has been out there over the last 20 years.
Yeah, Trickster. Okay, this one's an interesting one. So, wasn't supposed to be a trickster. Aaron, you could probably explain the drums better than me, because I have my theories, but...
I don't remember.
Yeah, see here's my theory, because Aaron used to play drums in high school, and so I thought, was it that? Are you the trickster?
No.
Are you McAdams?
I'm not
You have
that
the beard? I don't know.
Yeah, so every good group of characters needs a trickster. So that's the direction we went.
There's Ken.
And he represented what exactly?
The lenses, see into both sides of the war. A bartender, you come to them to talk about your problems, so people would come to talk to him, and he'd be able to see both sides of the story.
He's by far the one I developed the least.
Yeah.
Wherever he ended up, I don't really.
That's kind of what his thing was.
Because you guys all, in your head canon,
Sorry?
Doesn't he need a teapot?
No, that's later. We'll get to that. That's he's coming up.
because you guys, the McAdams guy is.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into like what McAdams is in the next slide. So that was against Simon Furman, Andrew Wildman, all the way back in '89. Another one of those Alpha Trion situations where it's like, there's something here, he's old. Like, he's so old that, like, we don't even know where he's come from. And so that was the early ideas. Again, that's a shot from Andrew Wildman from the UK books from Marvel back in the day. When you did the Ultimate Guide with Simon, there was a nicer image that's colored. But I wanted to use the original to kind of just convey just how far back this goes.
I should tell the story.
Yeah.
So when I started developing this idea of let's codify the 13, we knew there were a couple of them, which we haven't even touched on all of them yet, that were already out there. I knew Simon had set it up, so I called Simon and was trying to be like, do you have a plan for the 13 that you haven't displayed yet? Or is it just the writer's trick of breadcrumbs to a story that you may want to tell someday? And he was very much like, Aaron, it's your sandbox. I've set it up to be something, but I don't really have a firm plan beyond what we've already discussed. And fill it out, have fun with it. So I did go back with Simon so that I didn't inadvertently mess up some Dreamwave or
Something that he was
storyline that he might have had planned. And, as a sandbox player within the Transformers universe. He was very fluid and like, yeah, let's just come up with some stuff, and I don't have anything that you have to do. You know?
And out of respect to him, because he really,
Yeah,
through
yeah.
that Marvel run, he and Primus and just all these like the heavy elements that make the lore.
It was my job to help the brand. It wasn't necessarily my responsibility to do everything, right? I didn't have to be. So, hey Simon, if you had 13, I would have taken his list and just ran with it. But he didn't have a list, so I had to do some of this stuff.
And again, Livio, Francesco with Cyberverse. So we kind of had, that was our first toy of McAdams, if you had to build a figure. Very different interpretation with AB, with Transformers 1. Very frog-like. I don't know what they were going with that one. And then, of course, Age of the Primes, which the next slide will have the current toy, which comes with the lenses. That was shown 2 weeks ago, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's public sometimes. But that was 2 weeks ago. And yeah, again, vehicle modes confuse me for Ancients. That's like, if you ignored all this, that's a Hound toy to me. You know what I mean? Like that all mode.
You know what though? It makes sense to me because the 13 are so wild. If they made 13 toys that were all pretty wild and sci-fi, I know they'd be scared.
Again,
Like,
like
this is like, yeah, you can do those characters, but please, for the love of God, make it a vehicle kids recognize.
Yeah, I guess so.
In
That's
some,
probably the
in
logic.
some way. In some way.
Yeah. So Nexus, the combiner.
So, you know, combining has been a part, so obviously there's a guy that is multifaceted.
Early Dan Kahana through the Fun Publications book, a concept art, which was at the time using those Energon molds to make something of it. And of course there's Ken's.
And
Refining that.
what I like about this one is it a car combiner, a jet combiner, a military? It kind of blends all the combining classes in a way. If you squint, you're like, I kind of like that for a character that represents all of it.
And again, like there's Robbie Musso when he drew it for Fun Pub, Jose for Transformers Prime, Livio again for IDW. Again, AB's version was very streamlined. It's very hard to tell if there was combining elements, but again, those were characters that were in the background of the movie that, if that trading card didn't exist, I don't know what image I'd be using right now, in all honesty. Very like a screenshot of the movie. And then of course, I look into what might be a future toy one day. So, not much we could really say with that. He's the combiner, like Aaron's, this one's gonna be good after. But he's a combiner, and like Aaron said, at that time, there's how many combiners at that time? So 1/13 are combiners, you know? So, now this one.
So this guy represented the Beast, kind of the Beast Wars era, or any of the Laser Beam, Ravage, the animals.
So what would have been, like, who is this ancient beast character? And this is the one where when I was doing these slides, I was like, oh my, okay.
Every once in a while, I can get a deep cut in on him.
Yeah,
It's kind of
so you'll appreciate this. So, Savage Noble. So here's this thing. Who's Savage Noble? Why was he in Beast Machines? Why is he this ancient primal creature that can shift, that has wings, that can't communicate properly? Why did he survive Megatron's purge on Cybertron when everyone else couldn't? Who is this guy? So there was something there. It obviously didn't pan out in the end, but there was clearly something there. So, and then of course,
But what we did do some intermediate stuff, and got to the idea, well, maybe he's a centaur, well, maybe it's like this idea that it could be a triple changer in a way, that the toy actually is.
yeah, the toy is kind of like two things. So, and then of course Ken went with that centaur kind of the wings, the triptych helmet, and all of that stuff.
So it's the four-legged beast, it's the winged beast, it's the horned beast,
Why are
represent all.
Why are there beasts in Transformers? Once again, the origins of that. And then of course, the evolution of that. Jose really phoned it in there. I don't know what Jose was doing there. It was very simple. That one. But Livio did a great job with that. That's the I don't want to spoil, pre-Shockwave, if you didn't read the IDW books. And then, of course, the Onyx Prime, which pulls almost a little bit of Transformers Prime, Beast Hunters in shape with AD. And then, of course,
Which is also
yeah. And then, of course, when you go to the next one, which what we have coming very soon.
So to me, out of all of them so far, this is the most satisfying one. This looks like a.
I want to just point out a few things that Evan told me. So this is very recent. So the spear here is going to be his helmet pieces. The helmet could make the 3 helmets. So you're going to have a closed helmet. It has, again, it could do 4 legs. It could do the 2 legs. So and that's going to be a crazy one in the future. So
I just hope they're not molding it in metallic.
I know the one thing that's
I'm very afraid.
that color is GPSing the hell out of me. So I hope they learned. Like, it's been 14 years since we've had a GPS problem, so I don't know. I worry about that one. But
I'm excited about this.
Amalgamous. So here's an interesting one too.
So this is kind of just the idea of transforming matter in a way, getting into the cog, like it's maybe more like a blob or some non-skeletal thing. I wanted to celebrate the mechanism that is Transformers somehow in a character. And I did a bunch of weird studies of what. How do you try to create something different? How do you convey that? You know, is it unstable energy? Is it unstable parts? Yeah, very. Yeah. You know, well, we all have our, what we pull from our inspirations. I mean, when we get to this was 2003.
Yeah, 2003-ish. Yeah,
we didn't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, but again, I wasn't pushing any of these designs. I'm just trying to communicate
an idea.
The essence.
It's going to be cleaned up,
but
it's like, here's what,
so when Ken did this, I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Exactly what it meant, where it's just,
it's cogs, it's, all kinds of things. And then, of course, what he represents is transformation in a lot of ways. And I think the next one, so like Livio's interpretation, when you look at, see here, this is going to be key here too. So when you look at what is the Age of the Primes one, you have a transformation cog is going to be your item that's going to come with the toy. Very Shockwave inspired, so you can kind of see how the DNA of a logical character like Shockwave and transformations and engineering and science and T-cogs, there's the DNA of those characters, and it originates from Amalgamous. So. And then we have Luigi Maximo.
So this guy was out there. We knew a little bit of his story.
Again, Simon Furman.
It's been a long day. I don't remember it at the moment.
Well,
demonic looking dude from the comics back in the day.
Next slide shows it. So that's all we knew of it up to that point. And again, it's an ancient dude. Predates Cybertronian War. Who is he? What is he? Greg drew it. Simon wrote it. Last panel of the G2 comic book, see you later, we're going to talk Beast Wars for another 6 years. So it left us hanging, but there's something there. And that's why, once again, why Aaron had to talk to Simon, because clearly there was something going on, but those breadcrumbs didn't lead to anything at that time. Again, more Aaron Archer.
Early interpretation of how to make it a fuller, when he's just sitting in that chair, what does he really do?
Yeah, and you looked at what Greg wrote, drew, and you kind of reinterpret it, And then, of course, influence from a certain Marvel franchise.
Yeah. It's still weird when the guy ended up that way, but there he is.
And just anyone who read like the Infinity Gauntlet comic book back in the day and stuff, like, Ron Lim and stuff, Loki was this character along with Mephisto, were characters that would be like, hey man, like, you know, they're talking crap about you. Like, you should totally, like, do something about it. And so, he would be the sower of, hey, Megatron, it's like, you know.
So has anybody read the Covenant book here? I know you have. All right. Hard to find, I realize.
Yeah, they really.
And the last I was told, you can't find it online to even read for free. Is that still accurate? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting book, pretty dense, full of lore. Surprised that it got made. Still surprised that book got made.
And again, different interpretations with the O's. Jose's, again, didn't get to see him that well in Prime, but
You can see they're going back to the more.
yeah, when you see what's going to be the final version, they're celebrating Greg's version with Simon. That's going to be probably the final form at the end of the day, which I'm totally fine with because that's how he started, and in a way, that's how he should end. And what that alt mode is going to be, I'm very curious, but either way. So that kind of gives you that little journey. I got Megatron. Now, that goes to Pat Lee. 5 over, already cooking, aren't we? Anyway, there's
Somebody after us?
is there?
We got to clear out. Yeah.
Who's Frankie? I don't remember. Frankie Weaker? Let's go with Megatron. We're almost done anyways.
So obviously, what is the ultimate form of the betrayer character?
So that was the first time. And again, these are the early ideas of the 13. So here's another ancient guy. Andrew Wiley did the sketches before. Looks vastly different though. Dreamwave, great book. I mean, you could talk bad about Dreamwave all you want, but they made some great books back then. So great designs. Next one. So again, this goes into who's the 13? But all we know is we got Vector, a whole bunch of what ifs, and that fiery guy in the corner. You know?
There it is.
There it is.
This was me refining it more. So some of this, obviously played in the TF1.
And note how small they
Yeah,
are.
so that's Megatron.
So they were titans. They were.
This is Megatron. And I wanted to echo some of the Megatron elements, the Galvatron head, the weapon on the arm, primarily.
And again, Aaron's Armada-esque head sculpts. Yeah, horns and everything like that. And there's Ken's.
So that Ken turned it into a pretty menacing character, a different type of character. But that feels like a proto Megatron.
Decepticon emblem head.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then
I'm going to commend, if you look at this art ever, the backgrounds are very significant, very good silhouette stuff back there that tell a story with the characters.
And again, the Fallen, different interpretations. Again, I'm leaving some out here but Walter's version and Livio did his, and then the Christoph one that was done through the Prime Wars trilogy, which it was Mark Hamill who was voicing him. Of course, the Megatronus Prime, because he's the best Prime, the strongest Prime. And again, we know the toy, which everyone I'm sure is probably pre-ordered and is excited about, which is the next one. Oh, are we with that one? I think you might change the number of the slides on that. You can skip that one. There we go. I think I know what happened there. So
that's where he's ended up.
yeah,
Kind of best of both worlds.
skip that slide. I think I know what happened there. So now we have the 13th. So here's the complicated one. The 13th, the Arisen, the Matrix Bearer, different ways that we could cut this depending on the continuity. We'll go into the next slide. It's like you have something to say about it from your own end.
Well, let's see what's next. So, kind of a question mark, because ideally in the story, the 13th would be an unnamed character that becomes Optimus Prime, right? And he ultimately would be the 13th character in the Pantheon, waiting to be given the mantle down the road, kind of thing.
So is the 13th, whoever's holding the Matrix at the time is the 13th Prime, thus a chosen one. is it? That's why, like, you know, 'cause people were confused when they saw Transformers 1. Why is Zeta Prime part of this? You know, we have Prima. Who's Zeta Prime? It's like, well, maybe Prima had the Matrix, but then gave it to Zeta Prime, and you know, there's all those elements. So
A lot of moving parts, it doesn't always make sense.
yeah,
And I apologize, but yeah, if you read the novels, some of this is in there as well.
yeah, for the aligned continuity. Yeah. And I just want to make sure. I think the next one. I think that's it for. Yeah, and then you got the toy that's coming out. So this is our 13th toy in a sense, with the Titan class Star Convoy, Star Optimus Prime, which again, by having Hot Rod with it, who's also like technically a chosen one Matrix bearer, there's that extra element. Having the Zodiac, which deep dive into the Transformers Zone mythos and the creation of the universe, if we're going too deep into Transformers Japanese G1 lore. But it's such a, again, you love this design because it's so, it's so brave, fuchsia, Japanese G1, which is very different than what we've been getting.
That feels Cybertronian in its own
Yeah.
way too, which is the right approach for that character here. So we tried to codify all this stuff, tried to pull from lore, tried to make sense of things, tried to use interesting names, things that we could then build on down the road, and it found its way into TF1, it's finding its way into the product lines now. Again, I really never thought a lot of this would ever become anywhere near product. So pretty satisfying, pretty fun, that they're making such a big deal out of it.
And I think that's it for them, yeah. And then that's it, more or less. So that's like the 13 pretty much in a lot of that. And so here's some of Aaron's stuff that he does.
Yeah, sorry,
Let's stick to those there.
I'm embarrassed. Anyway, so I still draw these robots. I love these characters. I say this every time I get in front of you guys. It's the best fandom out there. You know, they don't have a Batman convention or a Deadpool convention, but you can go to significant shows across the globe for Transformers every year. That's because of the commitment over 40 years of puzzle play and fans and storytelling and media shifts with the markets as they ebb and flow over 40 years. And there's a lot there for people to be a part of. And it's a great brand. So I'm happy to be a part of it. We live in a crazy world right now. The ethos of this brand is all sentient people have the right to be free. Let's remember that. And with that, I think maybe time's next.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for Aaron Archer.